South Africa is hosting the annual African Growth and Opportunity Act AGOA Forum from November 2 to 4, where discussions center around the United States' flagship trade program for Sub-Saharan Africa. AGOA, which was established in 2000, grants eligible African countries duty-free access to the U.S. market, a measure aimed at fostering economic development. While AGOA has been instrumental in certain countries such as Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Madagascar, and Ethiopia, where it boosted exports and it created jobs, it remains underutilized, with just about half of eligible nations taking advantage of the program. Although the initiative, set to expire in 2025, has been renewed twice, African governments and industry groups are advocating for another 10-year extension of AGOA without changes to provide reassurance to businesses and potential investors concerned about the program's future. Well, joining me from Sandton, South Africa for this is Clive Ramathibela-Smith. He's the Senior Executive Partner, Hecare Capital and Partners. Thanks for joining me today, Clive.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I hope you're all having a lovely time.
Absolutely, we are. But let's get to it right away. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, that's AGOA, is a U.S. trade initiative which was passed in the year 2000, and the aim is to deepen trade ties with Sub-Saharan Africa and also help African countries develop their economies. Would you say this initiative has probably, lived up to the expectation of developing Africa in any way? Has it achieved that purpose so far?
Well, you'll be happy to know, my sister, I'm not a very politically inclined person. So obviously the question that you're asking is very sensitive, but the simple answer is it has a rather under-delivered. So the perspective and the objective was to actually make sure that Africa takes opportunities of the trading relationship between us and the United States. However, what it has done in the past is rather see an increment of capitalization on the part of the Americans, and it's benefited them more than it has benefited the African people. Of course, we take advantage of the levies that have been relaxed, the tariffs that we don't pay for trade and for export. However, the goods that we have been giving to America far extreme and beyond what they would normally be paying if they were paying at a normal pricing. So we welcome the arrangement and the agreement and the act. There are some good out of it, but I don't think it has delivered to an extent where we can all be comfortable and be happy about it.
All right. When you say you don't think it has delivered, whose fault is it? Is it America? Is it America's fault? Is it, African countries' fault? Or, who is to blame here? Or is it part of the agreement they probably, signed?
So you want me to play devil's advocate? I'll get into trouble.
I just want you to, emphasize, what you have said so far. Yeah. Just expatiate on it. Yeah.
So let's have a look at, for example, the issue with the chicken, the poultry industry. The poultry industry, for example, was supposed to be one of the important structures, particularly for South African farmers, because obviously us having to have an opportunity to do that means that we have better access to the American market. But what it has done, it has led to a lot of dumping of goods, cuts that the Americans don't want to eat. That has landed in South Africa, which has slammed the South African poultry industry because they're not able now to compete in the same industry because we're getting American dumped chicken that comes in at a cheaper price. And so therefore, the local market for the South African farmers has been very, very difficult. We can also look at other products, for example, beans, sugar beans, be they all these fantastic products that we do have access to on the local market become highly expensive and anti-competitive when compared to the goods that are coming in from America. So who has been at fault? I think Africa, and particularly the Southern African market, has failed to take into action some of the principles that were supposed to be acted out of AGOA, to take advantage of that and make sure that these exporting prices and these tariff cuts and this free trade arrangement is actually beneficial to the local farmers at the heart of the agricultural sector on the African continent. And what has happened is America has taken full control of how this is disinvested and how this is actually acting forward to be able to provide their local farming and their local redistributors of African goods at a better standing than what we do and how we benefit or how we are supposed to benefit from this particular arrangement. So I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying not understanding how AGOA works has also been at a disadvantage a lot of African markets for not being taking advantage of what is available in the American market.
All right, I like that you just mentioned African markets now. But before now, you were talking about South Africa. Beyond South Africa, we have other countries that are said to have really benefited from this particular policy. That's talk about Kenya, talk about Ghana. These are some of the countries that have benefited. So what do you think sets these countries apart? What are they doing differently? Isn't it the same agreement they're working with?
Well, the agreement is the same holistically. However, there are elements and principles per country that are segregated, that are in arrangement with the American markets. So, for example, citrus, for example, is not as lucrative as cocoa. So if you go further up north in Africa, where you've got better quality of cocoa, better quality of citrus, better quality of other goods, they tend to do better than the South African market, which is already stringent because of the fact that we're also having to look after the European market as well. But there's countries now, as you would have heard, that have been cut out of AGOA. And we thought this was a collective for the African market, but now America has chosen to distance itself from two African countries because they feel that they're not acting in harmony with their political agenda. So that's up to them, that's fine. But the countries that have definitely taken a stride, that have worked well with the AGOA arrangement, are those who don't necessarily have other markets other than the Americans, whereas South Africa hasn't benefited to that extent because we have China to look after, we have South America to look after, and we have the European markets also to look after. And America is a very small part of the entire pie.
All right. Well, should we be concerned that some U.S. lawmakers probably view this as an important soft power tool, particularly as a counter to Chinese influence, or is that immaterial? I mean, when I see what you have said so far, it feels you're probably towing the same line of, understanding. Is that what it is?
Trade is supposed to be fair, transparent, equal, and also be able to benefit both sides. So it has to be monogenous, it has to be mutually beneficial to both parties. In this instance, unfortunately, even as much as there's a very good reason to do it, there hasn't been as much of access to the local farmers, to the redistributors within the sectors themselves, particularly in agriculture. And it's not to say there's no opportunities. It's just to say, how can we increase the level of African participation to make sure that these benefits are actually recognized? And we need to have a cognizant idea of what it is that is going to be beneficially abstracted from these contracts and these agreements. At the moment, it seems like we are at the second tier and we are just accepting and receiving what is being given to us instead of us taking action and saying, this is the terms that we would like. So soft power, maybe I'm not politically inclined to mention that. However, certainly there's a discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots, or rather those who are taking full benefit of the AGOA arrangement and the act itself to those who are actually in more power. So it seems like the inequality of balance there, it's creating a little bit of a tension, particularly for markets that are very specific, like the South African market, for example, and the Botswana market and Namibia as well.
All right, let's take a bit on geopolitics. So do you feel AGOA has impacted the competition between the United States and China in any way, especially in terms of their influence on the African continent, and particularly in the context of trade and investment? When we wrap this up, we then move on to, some other conversations around this.
Yeah, so China is a very different story. I mean, they've already played open card with the African market, and they've been very heavily invested on the African continent. America's legacy investments are what's making it more and more difficult for other countries to participate. So, for example, because of the history of these countries, America has been very much deeply enshrined in South Africa's economy, particularly on the listed companies on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. Whereas China has slowly, over the last 20 to 25 years, tried to penetrate the same market, market, and they're making things much more complicated. They are, China, by the way, the biggest trade partner to South Africa. So obviously, technically, there is an advantage to South African markets to maybe prefer China to other markets. But let me go back to the trade balance, which we're discussing right now in terms of what AGOA presents. What AGOA was presenting to the South African market at the time when the contract was signed was an opportunity to be able to take our goods, to take them free to America to be sold on the American soil. The uptake of that ability to do so has been very, very slow. And that is what has hindered some of the opportunities to become very fruitful, excuse the pun, when it comes to agricultural products. Secondly, what's been difficult is to shift some of the businesses that had already been allocated, for example, to the United States, to the European Union, to the Chinese market. And we've seen how trade can sometimes be unfair with the recent changes in legislation and in policy that have made it difficult for South Africa to export some of its goods to the likes of the European Union and some countries who have been looking at us very differently since partnering with China. So there is a political agenda. I just wish that it wouldn't hinder the people at the back of these industries, who are the farmers and the farm workers, because they create a lot of work and a lot of jobs for South Africans, which is one of our biggest challenges in this country, is to fight unemployment. So it would seem that it would work in a perfect model, but it's not perfect. And we mustn't lie about it. We must just be honest and say we need to increase participation of these smaller African countries so that they have a more of a muscle when it comes into the American market and exporting.
Right. Let's talk about this model, this perfect model. So what's this perfect model that will make it all work for everybody, really, leaving no one behind?
I might lose my job over this, but the truth of the fact is, you want to value things on the value of the currency in which you are trading. So that's one of the biggest things that's created what we now know as the BRICS attempts to come up with a currency that will enable us to be able to sell our goods at a very value that they are worth. At the moment, we're using the US dollar. And so what has happened with AGOA is the same thing. Because of the weakness of our own currencies on the African side, on the countries that have signed up to AGOA, we can't take an advantage of the capitalization of currency based on the economic activities that take place between the two countries. Two, it would be very fair for us to say what it is what we want from America, not for them to dictate to us what we should take based on the fact that they don't want it. Case in point is the poultry industry, chicken, because they don't have other parts. And my sister, I don't know, here in South Africa, we eat chicken feet, we love chicken heads, and I know it's an African delicacy. Americans don't eat that, so there's no need for them to actually get those things. So they dump them instead of giving a valuable goods that can come and be absorbed into the country at a fair price that we'll be able to get people a fair pricing on. Instead, we've seen poultry prices, chicken prices go up instead of going down because of the additional chicken that we're supposed to be getting here that's supposed to be dispensed equally to make sure that the prices remain low. So because chicken is the most consumed product, protein in South Africa. So the fact that it's going up and it's becoming expensive, it seems like there's no cohesive arrangement there. There's another one linked to poultry as well. Eggs in South Africa, because of the recent bird flu that has taken place. We were supposed to be getting eggs at a very reasonable price for the United States. We're not. In actual fact, the minute we had a shortage of eggs in the country, what happened? The prices of eggs went up by nearly 30-40% because of the fact that we don't have a fair act that is enabling us to do the balance so that we can look after the economy locally in as much as we are looking them overseas. So there's these little things that are not lined, that are not synced, and that makes it imperfect. It can be perfected when we all step up, we use the same currency of trade, We use the same logistical purposes to make sure that trade is fair on both sides. And whatever goods they receive or whatever goods we receive, we are happy with the pattern of change and the exchange ratio or currency that is utilized to make sure that they benefit the economies independently.
All right. Well, clearly speaking, we see that some sectors actually benefited largely from this initiative. I talk about the apparel sector. It benefited a whole lot. And not only that, we see that some countries really benefited. I like that you probably cleared that already. So let's get to this sector issue. So why is it that, we see a lot of the apparel sector benefiting from this while other sectors are not benefiting from this? What should be done to ensure that, it cuts across other sectors, bearing in mind that some analysts are even saying that, we should probably extend this so it covers technology sector and some other sectors. What's your take on that? Looking at Africa, what are the comparative advantages and what are the edges, African countries have that we can probably put forward to ensure that it's not just apparel. I mean, we're not just going to be doing apparel. There are other things, we can do. So talk to us about that.
I totally agree with those colleagues that say that it must be extended to other sectors. However, I understand the concept behind why you want to focus mostly on agricultural products, because we are fighting against climate change. We are talking about right now food security being the most preeminent thing that we're supposed to all be protecting. We want to be making sure that we have a secured energy sector. And so perhaps maybe that's something that's one of the sectors that should be looked into, how to diversify. You know about South Africa's challenges with electricity at the moment. And those could have been other opportunities where we could be looking into. But there's also a historical background to all of this, my sister. If you look at, for example, the companies, we're talking about let's look at two of the Africa's most industrialized countries. We look at Nigeria, which is currently the largest economy on the continent. We look at South Africa, the most industrialized economy on the continent. Most of the revenues, look at South Africa, for example, for trade, we're looking at finance. Trade finance is the biggest industry in South Africa, bigger than mining and resources. In Nigeria, you have a similar pattern as well. You look at the oil sector, that also falls under energy, that also falls under resources. So Africa as a whole, we should have looked at this opportunity to look at how we diversify our revenues in our resources sectors, which is where we are dominant. But America was deliberate by this. America was deliberate because they knew that they've got companies who are vested in these resources, who are vested in these mining companies, who are vested in the energy sector. So it was going to be very difficult for them to amend that so that it is in link or in sync with these other sectors as well. So the closest that they could have done is to look at the agricultural sector, which is very well diversified, but very complex because of the currency disparity that I was talking to you about, which makes it difficult for us to trade fairly. But it's not that they cannot expend it. It's the fact that if they decide to do, what is it that they're going to be including? Now, I was fortunate. We are at the AGOA conference. We had a morning session. We're still going to be continuing into the afternoon. And some of the things that are coming out are very, very exciting. For example, how do we strengthen Africa's infrastructure? How can we extend AGOA to other countries like you were mentioning? How do we make sure that we stabilize African economies? How do we make sure that we get food security utilizing the trade platform that's been given to us? Those are some of the things that are very exciting that we're looking into. And by the way, food sector, agricultural sector, energy plays a very vital role. So how do we get energy sustainability without actually upsetting some of the agreements we've made on the environmental side with these things, such as, for example, the contract that we have with the world? And South Africa is getting a lot of benefit from that. America donating almost $8 billion towards energy reformation in the country. So you can see there's a lot of good, but at the same time, we need to be cautious not to reinstate some of what we call the anti-colonial structures that made Africa become dependent, despite the fact that it's got capacity to actually manufacture its own goods, produce its own goods, and sell its own goods at a price which is relevant to the rest of the world.
Great. Now, African governments and industry groups are actually pushing for a 10-year extension. I like that you are at that particular event. They're asking for a 10-year extension of AGOA without changes. Now, looking at that clause without changes, what potential benefits or concerns might arise from such an extension, without changes?
The most basic one is the political one. It's no question the world is in a very difficult position right now. We have two systematic wars happening, basically. One in the Gaza Strip between Israel and Palestine. The other one is the one that we inherited last year, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. Both these wars have constrained economic activity and made it very difficult for people to trade at a sustainable level. So what has happened is it has created a little bit of a quagmire of how America deals with areas or regions like Africa, for example, like the Middle East and Europe. And so that diversity has now questioned why China, in actual fact, is in a special position. Now, things like BRICS, which we saw earlier this year, extend its invitation to the rest of the African continent. We saw more countries come in there. Now, the question is there a conflict between being part of BRICS and becoming part of AGOA? And what are those conflicts? And what do we expect out of them? Which one is going to be bigger? Which one is going to be
Clive, do you mind answering that question you just asked yourself now? Yeah, I would like to get an answer to that. Really, is there a conflict between being part of BRICS and being part of AGOA? And we had that conversation around, getting South Africa out of AGOA just because of that. Let's have your thoughts on that.
My thoughts are, you never, ever reveal your cards. So I think South Africa is sitting very well, and some African countries, to have both the West and the East benefiting from their resources. The problem that we have is who's going to put more in and what are they going to get out? And we know with the history of America that they want in, but they want more out. And it is a political quagmire, and it shouldn't affect the basic people, the farmers, the workers, the industry. Those people must still be protected. The answer to your question is, I would have the best of both worlds and take advantage of that so that my people as a country benefit from the arrangement on both sides.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Clive. Ramathibela-Smith, Senior Executive Partner, Hecare Capital and Partners. Thank you for your thoughts.
Pleasure.